Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Let's begin the meeting. We've got an apology for lateness from His Worship. He'll be with us, I think, about 20 to 30 minutes. Kai, any late items? No late items, great. So do we need to do a resolution for apologies for lateness, Kai? Okay, so we'll just have Councillor Hughes move that the apology for lateness be accepted, seconded by Councillor Prendergast. Thank you. Right. Let's move on to declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest in particular they want to declare in respect of this meeting? Good, thank you. And turning now to the minutes from the last two meetings. So that's the 6th of March, which was chaired by Councillor Jeffries, and the 28th of April, which was chaired by me. Does anyone have any questions or amendments in relation to those minutes? Councillor Jeffries? That's all right. No problem. No problem at all. Just while you're looking, in order to speed things up, I just tend to identify people who will move and second resolution. So if you get called upon, I hope you'll be comfortable with that. How's the computer going? That's all right. I tell you what, how about we park that? We can always come back and we'll hold confirmation of the minutes. You just make a comment, we'll circle back on that one. Let's turn now to the decision reports. And I think because we've got Deloitte here, it would be sensible if we take item 21, which is the audit arrangements letter and annual report timetable first. So welcome to the both of you. Thank you for joining us. I have to say that this is the best explanation of an audit plan I've ever read. I've been doing this for about 30 years in local government, so thank you. Certainly made for a lot easier reading, so I really appreciate that. I wondered, Matt, if you wouldn't mind starting us off. The big issue I've got is trying to get my head around those things which are required by legislation and those things that for which the council has a discretion. Because I'm trying to work out the extent to which this committee has an ability to sign off an audit plan, or whether you're just telling us what the plan is, in which case we're not signing it off. So it would be helpful if you could take us through, and I think your materials start on page 68, colleagues, of the papers. If you wouldn't mind starting us off, Matt, by just giving us that overview in terms of what's legally required, because that's the bit I struggle with. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. And in terms of just the question of what's required, the audit is required under the Local Government Act, and under the auditing standards, there are a number of areas we are prescribed to look at, but there are also areas where we need to exercise our professional judgment as auditors. So basically, all those areas outlined are areas we would need to consider during the audit. Some are mandated by the auditing standards, like revenue and management override controls. Those are required to have a presumed risk. There are other areas where we do need to exercise some discretion, but the scope of work we would perform might be reasonably limited depending on the initial understanding we gain from our discussions with management and the work that we do. So an easy area to point out might be In terms of areas of focus for the current year, one of those areas with the impact of the recent flooding events or severe weather events within the region, that will have a more significant impact for some councils, whereas Ōtorohanga, we understand from initial discussions, there was little to no impact to the region as a consequence of those flooding events. So from an auditing perspective, we would need to make sure we required and demonstrated in our audit file that the impact was limited and appropriately considered, but the scope of work that we then need to do as a consequence of that is reasonably limited. So, yeah, broad brush, everything that we have put into the audit plan we do require to consider. There are also areas outlined in there that we're required to consider because the audit is performed on behalf of the Office of the Auditor General, and they request every council auditor to undertake an assessment of those specific areas, such as legislative compliance or performance, property and waste. So the scope of work that we do need to do is also driven by the expectations of the Auditor General and the work that we need to do as a consequence of the Local Government Act and Ōtorohanga District Council being a public benefit entity.
So if everything on this plan is required to be done, how is it that audit plans for different councils are different?
Sorry,
If everything in this audit plan is required to be done, why is it that audit plans for local authorities are different?
Why is it presented to you?
So I happen to know what the audit plan is of another council. It's completely different in some important respects to this audit plan. So I guess I'm still struggling to understand which parts of these are compulsory and which parts are matters on which you're exercising a discretion and you're telling us what's going to be in the audit plan. Because if you're telling us that everything's going to be in the audit plan, there's no point us approving this audit plan, is there? You're telling us what it is.
Everything is required to be considered, but it's important we give those charged with governance an understanding of the areas that we are looking at to roll it first, for you to consider and also provide your input into it. Regardless of important that we do consider all of those areas, because they are important to the audit process, but there are a number of areas we haven't put into the audit plan that we will consider too. So there is the ability to exercise discretion. For example, if you felt there was a specific area in performance, property and waste that warranted additional attention, you would be welcome to bring that to our attention, and we would consider that further through the audit process. Or there was somewhere in procurement that you felt warranted additional attention, we would certainly work with those charged with governance to understand that and tailor our audit approach and the scope of work that we're doing to address that.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions on the audit plan?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So you basically, it's a case-by-case basis as far as prioritising different areas of the audit. So you do that through discussion with senior council staff, I presume. So as you said, the floods didn't affect us here, but somebody else has got a higher priority. So that's still pushed back, is that what you're saying as far as that goes?
Yeah, so we definitely do, discussions and tailor it based on the individual entities. And based on those initial discussions, we evolved the audit plan to address the areas of concern. It does evolve year to year, and there are different areas of focus. Largely, we're not trying to do additional work if that additional work doesn't need to be done, but it is important we evolve the audit plan. And even through the audit process, we're going to tailor the audit procedures and the scope of the work that we're doing as we identify areas of consideration. The audit plan might evolve. So what we've got in front of us here might evolve as we step through the process.
Oh, that's great. That was my next question, as to how that would evolve, but no, you've answered that for me. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Jeffries. Oh, good. We'll come back to you. Sure.
You hear me okay? Yep, good. It was section 2B of the your audit report. areas of broader focus, and I think it was the third paragraph, the last sentence is incomplete, and I didn't quite pick up what you were trying to say there. But I guess the question is, when is the claim that we have in-house expertise, when is that substantiated and by whom? And this needs to be from the outset of all revaluations.
Sorry, is that the in-house expertise used for the
Yes,
valuation?
yes, the writing is very small. We'll see if I can find, hang on, probably increase the size here, but it's better. I'm on page 90, sorry, page 90. So have you got the, oh, sorry, that, yeah, so there's that third paragraph that starts in the current year. The last sentence, the valuation of assets can be a complicated process, and management councils need to ensure the robust review of the valuation process, and then it stops. So I just wondered whether there was something missing off there. But the question is, when we claim that we have the in-house expertise to revalue or assess the fair value of our assets, when is that claim, if you like, substantiated, and by who? Do you see what I'm trying to say? If our staff are saying that they believe they've got the expertise to do that work, yep, does someone actually check that to make sure that what they're claiming is actually correct? Do you do that?
So then an expert will provide a peer review to that and
Yes.
help provide additional comfort to the assessment that's been done in-house.
Yeah.
We would also perform additional work on top of that and we use the word challenge, and I appreciate challenge can be, might be misconstrued, but the auditing standards require us to challenge the assumptions that have been applied by management and those assumptions applied by management. And we will do additional testing on top of that to ensure that the assumptions that are being applied in that valuation are appropriate. So there's a layer of work that's done by in-house expertise. It'll be peer reviewed, and then we will do an additional test on top of that to again comfort that the movement in fair value is reasonable. It's an area that, because of it has a number of assumptions in it, a reasonably significant change. Some of those assumptions can have a material impact on the fair value. So it is an area that we do spend a bit of time and attention on.
Okay, great, thanks for that. The next question I had was, absolutely, yep.
Thank you. This is one of the areas, Matt, where I have an issue. Because we are seeing a very substantial increase in auditing costs across the country. It's not in any way a reflection on you or the auditing profession generally. It's simply a reflection of the cost and time spent relative to market rates. But nevertheless, the impost on a council of this size is massive. So I asked myself, what value is obtained by the auditors auditing something that's already been peer reviewed by an independent expert? What benefit are we really going to get from that? Because the issues of valuation are very much judgmental. And you'll spend an enormous amount of time, quite justifiably, challenging the thoughts of an independent expert who's already peer reviewed the work done in the house.
I do understand and I appreciate the increase in cost is considerable, and I understand that. In terms of what value you do get from it, I understand the challenges that you're doing a lot of work in-house. You've got an independent expert to do a peer review, and then we are required to do an additional work on top of that to get to a conclusion that we are satisfied to slide off the audit opinion. So last year, for example, as we did a review of the valuations that have been undertaken by the independent expert, we actually identified errors in that calculation in prior year that resulted in some adjustments to the financial statements. So the work that we've done, did last year, and we'll do again this year, provides that comfort to us to allow us to sign off the audit opinion that the financial statements are not materially misstated. So last year, we actually identified areas in it. In terms of, it is challenging. I certainly understand the question when you say, well, you've got an independent expert to come in and give you, their assessment of what fair value is, and you've got the auditors then telling us that you need to do this considerable amount of additional work, and it is something that's evolved considerably over the last 7 to 8 years in terms of the amount of work that is expected from us as auditors. It's not certainly something we are doing because we want to spend additional time and effort in the audit. It's something that's mandated to us. So from my own perspective, if the file is picked up for a practice review in which we get audited as the auditors, and they came through and said, well, I haven't done enough work on that. That would have a consequence to me, and that I haven't put enough audit evidence in the audit file to justify the audit opinion. So it's certainly an area that we have to do. We're not doing it because we want to spend more time and effort in the audit. But I do appreciate the challenge that you take this. You've got an expert to provide you with their fair value assessment, but unfortunately, it is an area that we do need to spend that time and effort because of the judgment that is required and the significant assumptions involved in that assessment.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Matt, just with, is there a requirement to have a peer review? If we were just to do an in-house valuation, since it's going to be audited anyway, it's costing us, probably another 30K to get a peer review on top of the audit fee. So if you're going to audit it to that extent, do we need to have a peer review?
Under the auditing standards, you're not necessarily mandated to have a peer review. I think this, I could be wrong here, Graham, but this might be the first time, certainly in my time being involved in the council, that we've had an in-house review will then be used to assess the fair value of the assessment. I think it would be probably prudent the first time around to have that peer review done, and as we develop our understanding of in-house capability, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying in-house the expertise that you have is inappropriate. It's just that it is, in our experience, would be abnormal to rely totally on an in-house expertise to undertake these assessments because of the complexity involved. And again, not saying the in-house expertise don't have the expertise to undertake the assessment, which is the first time around it might be appropriate to have that peer review. As we understand that and develop that moving forward, we can certainly consider, I would suggest that we wouldn't want to totally step away from independent experts undertaking that assessment. It might be the frequency with which we do that could be altered moving forward. And I think unfortunately what you see now is, typically the valuations we historically would have only done on a 3-year cycle. Unfortunately, now with the inflationary environment that we sit in, we are seeing a lot of entities that are forced to undertake these valuations with a lot of, it's been undertaken more frequently and often on an annual basis, simply because of the cost inputs that are coming through. So you're not mandated, and we could work with you to assess whether a peer review would be required for the current year. I would suggest that it probably would be first time around, but we have to exercise to go through.
It was just with the and Bridget might correct me if I'm wrong here, with the last reval that we did, it was prepared externally by external valuer, and the amount of work that we put into that as well, we most have done it ourselves, with the additional cost there. There's been
a considerable amount of work done, particularly in the roading around regional valuations with unit rates, etc. Do you see a benefit there in terms of cost saving, where every council is incurring considerable costs doing their own valuations and getting peer reviewed as well?
Sorry, to be honest, quite interested in hearing from the conversation.
Yeah, just in terms of like more of a regional base to revaluations as opposed to all 10 Waikato councils doing their own independent valuation, where we're effectively nearly all having to reval every year now because of, as you said, inflationary pressure.
Graham, you asked if it's possible to take a regional view in relation to revaluations rather than revaluation council. Is that what you mean? Because you're saying that inflation is a issue, not a council issue.
Yeah, I'm just looking at economies of scale here. We're all, every council in Waikato is having to revalue every year, and so we are incurring considerable costs both in the revaluation itself and audit costs. Would it not be better to have a regional approach to those valuations? So,
certainly something that could Graham, I think the cost drivers that are driving a lot of those valuations would be reasoning system region to region, and certainly there could be merit in considering that. It'll be an area that would need some consideration. So we go, but I certainly think it's got some merit in consideration to the issue, and that you're getting a lot of, it is a costly exercise to work through, and a lot of these inflation pressures are reasonable, and you could develop a good understanding of those cost drivers, and then you look to apply that. So it definitely an area with respect.
I think to add to that is that I think as part of the evaluation exercise, cost driver is one of the significant assumptions, but together with it, it's also come with difficulties, which I think drives out from a lot of the system that the council has. So I think it's something different that could be looked at, but I guess it's also coming back to providing an opinion for the Ōtorohanga District Council. Will need to look at what are the numbers that flows through the financial statements, and cost is one thing, but it's also some other assumptions that normally goes into the evaluation. So it's not just the cost, it might be also involving conditions of the asset and where the assets are located, and even the Waikato regions, you might get different pricing sometimes in different areas. So I think of what we have seen sometimes in Waikato, and even here, some of these say the length of pipe might work different as well. So I think it's just when you have a peer review, it's what they normally do have the wide database to the information that will be able to be provided when it's done by in-house. I think it's just how the council consider what are the significant assumptions that you put in that, say the cost of this work X will make sense in that case.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, going forward, is there any value to us in actually having our own staff do a peer value assessment? Because if it's going to be peer reviewed by a valuer and then audited, why don't we just give it to the valuers and let them do it? Or is there some cost saving in us doing a fair value assessment ourselves? I just don't understand why we've got 3 legs there. Can we get away with 2? That's the question.
Brendan, did you want or give Matt some respite? Is there anything that you wanted to add in relation to this? Because I think what we're all struggling with is, I know you folks in finance like to be precise, but 3 bites of the cherry normally consumes the entire cherry.
Yeah, I guess, as Graham mentioned, we did that last year with the roading and water valuations, and we got them done completely externally. we pretty much spend as much time on staff as if we did it ourselves, and we paid them for the privilege of them doing it, and we did most of the work ourselves anyway. The price of peer review is obviously less than the price of paying them to do the full thing, with the amount of work that was actually, yeah, like I say, involved by us in actually doing it in the first place. I think we're better off saving money doing it in-house, paying the peer review.
I think it's a good question, but also a good answer, so thank you. Councillor, did you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
Sorry, just one further one, still to do with valuations. On page 89, there's a table there that's got it's a dashboard of our areas of water focus at the very top of fair value of infrastructure assets. This is more of a question towards Graham and Brendan. Is that asset valuations have caused headaches to us in recent years? Are we confident that all appropriate work associated with valuations is either underway or ready to implement?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only thing that I'm still waiting on is the actual proposal from the people I'm going to do a peer review. So I'll chase them up once this meeting's done, see if we can get that. Internally, I know talking to Emma, who's our manager of assets and technical support, pretty much everything's already capitalised in their RAM or asset finance systems for this year so far I've got. So it'll just be anything that gets finished by the end of this week for it to go through. Then we're pretty much at the place where we push the button, do the valuations. We'll do a lot of in-house checking based on the work that we looked at last year, because all the stuff they said being asking questions. Like you said, it's a basis to do our own internal checks, make sure everything's coming out as we would expect. When we get the peer review done, we should be fine to have it done in time.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, Brendan, yeah, we're in a significantly better space, particularly in Mark's team in terms of recruitment that we've made since last year in that asset space. And last year, when we were preparing the annual report, the office was closed. You know, we were all working from home, and there was certainly some difficulties around that too. So at the moment, the asset team in Mark's area sits right next to the finance team, and they're talking to each other as you do. You know, so yeah, I think we're in a much better space this year.
Yeah, no, that's good. Don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go at you. I'm just saying that that's the reality. That's what's happened in the last few years. Is that asset valuations have been a thought outside, so I was just making sure this year we're going.
Yes, no, as far as we're concerned, we are. I mean, obviously, barring anything out of the happening that we're not expecting, but yeah, no, if we're going, we should be fine.
Right. Look, the good news, Councillor Jeffries, is Aaron's going to check twice. Councillor Prendergast, any questions?
It's on this process with us.
Yeah.
And I have an organisation involved in struggling with the same aspect, but student got an experience. Downstairs, down with us, it's the next question.
Well, I think there's widespread concern across the sector about the ambit and scope and cost of that time that's been taken up by external owners. And questions about the value that's been used. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm simply repeat it. And I happen to know this is an issue that is exercised by local government in New Zealand, and I understand that we're going to consider the upcoming conference on this very issue. So, Matt, I don't think there's much point in me taking this any further in the sense that you told us that this is the audit plan. If I had any choice, I would have raised questions as to the value of auditing fair value of infrastructure assets. I would have queried the value of auditing government reviews of proposals. I would have queried the value of auditing good practice guides, ESG and climate change. I would have queried the value of auditing the new natural instrument area, and I would have queried the value of auditing the 2003 flooding events. But you are telling us that we have no choice. And on that basis, then I think it simply leaves us to pass the resolution, which is that the committee recommenders wish to sign the engagement letter and that it receives the audit plan for the 21. I assume that's 2010.
I just noticed that it should be 22, 23 again, sorry.
So receive the audit plan for the audit of the 22, 23 annual. Now, I should just check, this does not involve any scope in relation to the audit of the LTP, which is a separate audit. Okay? Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just before we put that motion, could I just ask one or two questions about the accounting standards?
Of course.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, on page 95, there's a reference there to financial instruments, the new accounting standard, IPSA is 41. Are we good to go with that standard, or does it not apply to us so much?
As far as I'm aware from my initial looks at it, we're fine. It doesn't apply too much because we don't have a lot of, interest rate swaps or any of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that probably doesn't affect us so much, but there is some just property classifications.
Okay, on page 102, the receivables amount of recovered, this is the unadjusted from last year. Have they been dealt with, or are we doing anything with those? 68,000.
I couldn't answer because I can't remember what that was about. Something that the auditors thought we should adjust and we didn't, or it might have been something that was last minute that wasn't going to material stage.
The reason I'm asking is it's not going to resurface. It's not going to resurface again this year.
I would assume not.
Yeah, I think, wasn't it the one that we actually have recovered? Yeah.
I think it might be, yeah. If it's the one I'm thinking of, but I don't have the information.
And the only other question I had, Mr. Chairman, was on page 106, the accounting implications forecasting there. This is forecast to use a variety of accounting estimates. How much reliance do we place on the local government with that?
So the Pearl forecast we use for our long-term plan, obviously, we did the long-term plan. We don't really use it for anything apart from that. Because we don't inflation adjust our annual plan, we basically take what's in the LTP. And then people are redoing it because inflation is higher than the bill adjusters from LTP, for example, they would be adjusting their annual plan anyway. So bill comes out usually October every year. So we have to use the most recent one plans for next month. I think we're pushed forward to next month, 30th of October this year, get those so that should theory take into account of inflation and stuff too.
And those are acceptable to audit. Those forecast assumptions are acceptable to you guys.
I haven't historically, I guess, I haven't taken this one yet.
Yeah. No, that's right. I just want to make sure.
Someone be using the latest information.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to put the recommendation, which is that we recommend this wish to prepare a signed engagement letter for the audit for the 22-23 annual report, and that we receive the audit plan for the audit of the 22-23 annual report as presented by Mr. Boyd. So that'll be moved by me and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you again for the quality of the audit plan provided. I may not disagree, you may disagree with it, but I appreciate the clarity with which you attack the issue. Thank you. Thanks to the both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, I think our friends from Aon are here now, so welcome. Please come forward. I think I'm sure Brendan will be delighted that we'll postpone his sensitive expenditure policies till after the insurance folks. Okay. Thank you very much for attending, and we really appreciate you taking time to speak with us in what I suspect is an increasingly dynamic environment. So we have a paper that I understand you folks have a presentation, so we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us along. I'm Deanna McDonald. I'm the National Client Relationship Manager for our local government risk practice group for Aon. And with me, I have Megan Wilson, who's our National Manager. So we'll just start going through and just give you a brief market update on what's happening around the place at the moment. Pretty much going through and separating out what the market has been prior to the 27th of January, environmental floods in Cyclone Gabriel, and then going forward. So prior to and looking at last year, there have been a lot of what's classed as secondary natural catastrophe events. These are the weather events that are happening more frequently around the globe. And last year we estimated about $313 billion in economic losses. We can see on the map there at the moment that there were some quite significant events, including the likes of Hurricane Ian in October last year, which accounted for about 40% of the insured losses globally. Now, not all of these events were insured, but the majority of them had some impact on the insurance industry. The APAC region, so the Asia Pacific region itself, had losses of $80 billion last year. And out of that, 60% of it was flooding. So it shows that these weather events have quite a significant impact on the insurance industry itself. There was about 13.5% losses globally out of everything that happened that was insured. Now, how that plays with us, we work in a global market. Even though we have about 5 main insurers in New Zealand, they are all over offshore. And as much as they will be putting their capital out to market in New Zealand, they're also working in that global market to reinsure out that. And the reinsurance happened, the treaty happens in the 1st of January. They were expecting to be quite challenging, and they were. And with that, it meant that the capacity available, the capital available to go into the market was restricted and challenged. They were not putting out the amount of capital for the risks that were out there at the time. With the region that we're in at the moment, this just goes a bit closer to home, and we can see that there's a lot more in the secondary natural catastrophes. We've got a couple of the likes of volcano and earthquake there, but we can go through and model for those types of events. What is tricky is modelling for flooding events. You can never tell what's going to be coming when, if you like. And with that, it makes it very difficult for the insurers to know how much they're going to be on. Taken for, if you like. So there's been a lot of economic volatility. There's a lot of geopolitical instability. We've got supply chain issues and climate change going on at the moment, which is making it very difficult to know what the resilience on your network is going to be and what your risk management strength is going to play into the underwriter's decisions when you're going out to market. Now, we purchase your insurance through the Waikato or COLAB group of councils, and that works in your favour in that it's a collective purchase. So we're going out with quite a large group of assets, larger value. And with that, we're able to play in different areas with the markets, especially at the below ground space, which we go off to London for. With that, at the moment, the American market, as I mentioned, they had quite a significant loss with Hurricane Ian. Now, we are going over there with a history, and the team, including Matthew, will be going off in September. And we've got a history, we've got good relationships with the market, so they know we're going to be already, we've got those meetings booked in, they know you, they know your assets.
They're not a distressed purchase. As Dean rightly says, there could be a bundle of new clients if you were going into the London market. US markets are very expensive, but we have that long-standing relationship. You don't want to be a distressed purchase going into those markets because they will smell like. So we've strategically built those relationships over years.
So moving on to what has been quite a significant impact on the New Zealand market with the 27th of January flooding and also Cyclone Gabriel. So once again, it's another secondary natural catastrophe loss. These are ongoing claims, and these numbers are changing frequently every week. They were up to date as of 10 days ago. So it's having an effect on where we are placing ourselves. But on the 30th of June is when the New Zealand markets go through their reinsurance treaty. So I mentioned earlier, the 1st of January was the global reinsurance, the 30th of June is the New Zealand market reinsurance. So how that plays out with us, we're not sure, because the 1st of November is when you renew your insurance. Yeah.
Probably the biggest impact to the New Zealand markets will be that one that said over 14,000 claims paying mostly straightforward write-offs for damage doesn't contest. This is a market-wide issue. It's not just corporate that have suffered losses. So we do know, we do know one insurance who has effectively triggered their insurance program because of this. So we have to see some impacts there. Right. So it's not all doom and gloom, but as you rightly stated earlier on, it's a dynamic market currently. The other component to this, which is giving us, if you excuse the pun, a perfect storm, is global inflation. And Dee alluded to various geopolitical things. I haven't seen a newspaper today, so I can always have a Russia at the moment. But you have all of these factors adding up to the value of your assets or the cost of a claim. Everything's increasing in price. So that was the statistic that I saw the other week. We put it up there. It's December 22, might have slowed down. New Zealand is up there with the rest of the world in terms of inflation costs. Now, why is that relevant? Your premiums are basically derived from a rate percent charged against your values when we're talking about property insurance. And probably one of the biggest issues we have at the moment is what are those numbers going to be in 12 months' time? That's ignoring them. Can you get anybody to fix the stuff that should go wrong? That's the other component to it. So when it comes to setting values for your insurance program, you need to be cognizant of these impacts. This is something we've spoken to Graham and others about already, but we're seeing these things coming through. What does all of this mean
Sorry, Matt, if I could just interrupt. As my colleagues know, I'm the chairman of CoLab, and one of the things that I've learned over the last few years as a result of your excellent assistance is that the better prepared councils are, both in terms of understanding what assets they have for insurance, the values of those assets, and have a better understanding as to the level of risk that those assets are subject to, the more assurance and certainty you can provide to the market, and therefore the more comfort they can get about providing good quality risk-based costs. And that the less prepared we are, the more will be built in to that assessment, and the cost will go up. Is that a fair estimation?
Yeah, so we are starting this whole renewal process this year about 2 months early than what we do. Probably much to Graham's disgust, because he's got to get stuff back to us next week, I think, Graham. But the reason for that is to allow time to go through those schedules, go through the information provided, understand what the values are. When we were in London last year, one of the underwriters said to us, it's so refreshing to see some of the values that are representative. Probably searching the entire nation when I say this, but you don't want to be an actual case. A South American meatworks values haven't changed for the last 5 years. Underwriters are not done, they know what's going on with the rest of the world. So the ability to go to them with accurate, clear, concise information of the best quality we can get differentiates yourselves from all the other hundreds of submissions that go across their lists. So that is what we're doing with Graham and team right now.
And I make that point because the clearer we can be, the less it will cost us as a region and as a council.
Correct, you mitigate the impacts to the market. The market will always be what the market is, but the better high quality clear data we provide to that market, we they are to engage with us. So what does this mean in terms of what we think is going to happen? And as Dean has covered off already, we've had the increase in the insurance costs. We've had markets being a little bit more selective as to where they want their capital, which goes back to your point about good quality data. The initial estimates on the rate percent, it's probably actually transpiring to be at the higher end, probably about plus 20%. There's a couple of local insurers who come in and said they just get 20% of their portfolio from what's happening. So to start with, that's a very good point. That's on rate. If your values go up by 20%, then you are in essence looking at a 40% increase. So that leads into a number of other conversations. Excuse me. That's very heavily focused on the property side of things. That last point down there is also relevant from the liability perspective. Now, we don't place your liability program, but this is a generic liability comment. We are expecting to see some impact in relation to class action suits and litigation funding. The litigation funding has been proposed in the background for a number of years. I would not be surprised if we don't see somebody trying to hold a local authority responsible following the cyclone at the awful flooding. You can't really be held responsible for the weather event, but how would you manage the environment? Did you do anything that's contributed to that? And the sad reality is there are enough dollars at stake for somebody to try and run that wrong. So we're just keeping a close eye on that one as well. We were asked to do a wee. That's what I wanted. We don't need to talk about climate change as well. That's a whole other subject that we will address. We were asked to do a bit of a comparison against a similar sized council in terms of last year's premiums, this year's premiums. As you can see, yes, the total values are different, but you need to remove for comparison purposes, because we don't place your liability, public liability suppression indemnity under what those premiums are, whereas the other council does have those numbers in there. But what you can see is largely very similar in pricing. There are a few ups and downs, but largely very similar. And you do benefit hugely from being a collaboration. That shared procurement is a real good thing for you. Because if we were to look at the placement for you as a standalone council, insurers would have to give the premium limits. So that would push your premiums up. But because you're part of that collective purchase, we're able to bypass all those minimum premium issues, and that is then reflected in the premiums that are charged to you, because it's the underwriters basically give us one premium for the member councils. So they look at the total assets of the councils involved in that collab, and we get a top line premium that is then allocated out in proportionate basis.
Just to put some context around that as well, the numbers at the top, we've got Ōtorohanga at 3 to 4 and then 6 next to the other, they come down to the present zones. So when they're looking at the infrastructure policy, for example, there's a higher risk in the 6 compared to what we are here. So just because the insurers will go through and do their own modelling and look at what their accumulation is going to be, what risks are in each area. So because where we are here, we're in a relatively benign, especially in the infrastructure space, earthquake zone. We've got a lower risk in that space, so we don't need to be charging an extra premium on those.
Well, that's a very brief summary. Are there any questions from any of that? As I say, we've started the entire process early, and one of the reasons for that is to be able to come back to you with options. Deanna and I've been involved in local authority business for many years. I remember this gentleman over here, previous existence. And we are fully aware there is an affordability issue. Keep going plus 20, values keep going up, and at some point there becomes an affordability issue, which is linked back into that risk management comment and appetite for risk. That is next level from ranking in terms of what we want to do with councils to establish those.
No, I guess the only other thing really is just around our current cover and whether you think it's sufficient or whether there's other areas where we should be insured.
The only thing that we would probably talk to you about in addition to what's there is cyber. However, cyber is an interesting market at the moment. Insurance is largely about fortuity. It's something that may happen. And unfortunately, cyber is rapidly becoming something which the conversation comes through what if, but when. And at that point, the insurers start charging big premiums for restricted cover. There is an argument to say you, I'm not speaking for your IT department to do such a thing, but there is an argument to say that rather than pay that premium for what is relatively unlimited to cover, because that's what the market will find, are you better off investing that into enhanced security, whatever it may be. So the cyber is the only one. We are going through a process internally of reviewing the limits to the higher material damage and infrastructure to take into account those inflationary pressures. That's a piece currently, which to back to again what the inflation from growth colleagues sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Your worship.
Thank you. Firstly, my apologies for being late and probably coming in with questions maybe inappropriate at this time, but that's okay. Just looking at those, sorry, back to that previous slide again. I suppose it's a question for Graham. Why have we got some columns with no cover and comparable councils have got quite high covers? Why is there a big discrepancy there between those? Let's ask that question first. So like you've got Ōtorohanga District Council, no professional indemnity cover, no public liability cover, and the other councils have got quite substantial cover in that space. Why is that?
Yeah, we have got public liability and professional indemnity cover, but they're through Marsh, not through.
Okay, cool. That answers that question. Second one, which goes back to a point you raised earlier with the increase in premiums, 20%, you've got a obviously a valuation increase of a similar amount. So I just put national impact on insurance premium rises. So what is there any modelling done on the impacts on communities in terms of relocation, reinsurance and reinvestment should people not be insuring their properties they can't afford to? And then we do have a natural disaster and someone has to take up that cost. So nationally, the taxpayer has to take it up. And potentially that could be far more problematic than covering insurance. I suppose if we use Ōtorohanga as an example now, we've got extensive damage over a huge area, and there'll be a lot of properties that obviously Aon and the likes will be reassessing whether they're insurable in the future. And that's fine, but it's so widespread, the further implications down the track are absolutely monumental. I'm just unsure how we get over that if we can't meet it on private space. What is the public impact? The conference to tell us.
Sorry, it's not quite that, but we're certainly going to raise a topic which is along those lines. Will we ever end up in parts of New Zealand that are uninsurable? Probably not. Will we end up in parts of New Zealand where the insurance is very cost prohibitive and or very restrictive? Probably. I think going off topic slightly, but I think perhaps from council's perspective, as you become more and more aware of these issues, and let's say there does become some restriction in the insurance market or flood-prone areas or other things, and it may not be an issue for this council, but what do you do in terms of management treating as necessary? What do you do in terms of the way you allow people to build? We saw a presentation by the EQC. Graham, did you come to?
Yes, I did, and Ross did as well. So.
And there was a picture of, I think it was North Shore, and there was a picture of an aerial photograph taken of the house, and then the North Shore, there's a cliff. Oh, okay. The point is there was a cliff. And John was not probably went up there. And the council allowed somebody to subdivide behind the house, so it affects to the area of the cliff. And then there's a photograph of half the cliff gone and half the house gone. So there's no risk, but then there's development. So that's perhaps the question is, what is the LTP look like? What does the development plans look like?
Other questions, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. I was just interested in your comment earlier on about the potential, I've got this right, potential litigation over like flooding events for councils. So as far as councils are concerned, will that come under their public liability, insurance? So, but it could become quite problematic if it became widespread, and especially in some of these areas like, Te Whairawhi and other areas like that. So how can they manage that?
I wish I had an answer for you. That comment is unfortunately become quite cynical working in our profession. And that comment is based on the fact that councils are perceived to have a bottomless pit of money and are always responsible. Whether that is true or not, it's entirely a conversation. However, going back to that example of when people build properties, is there a question to be answered if, and this is supposition on my part, but is there a question to be answered if council would allow people to build it in an underground area and then a flood comes through?
They should have been doing with the consenting side of it, with how the house is built, should have been a long time.
I suppose that's probably where committees like this come into place for councils, or, you know, risk assurance. I mean, it's, that's whoever made the decision to build that house in that cliff, it was foolish, basically. So, robust processes must be followed for that to prevent those sorts of issues happening. So,
Councillor, any other questions? Councillor Jeffries.
More just points of clarification, page 57. But the two references there to infrastructure insurance. Just for clarification purposes, more than anything, Matthew, we're saying up to $10 million is 100% cover. Is that right?
It's okay. So under the current infrastructure,
Yes. Yep.
oh sorry, under the current infrastructure arrangements, there is in place a funding agreement with central government. They used to be under CEDA, whereby they will pay 60%. You have to show that you either got funds or taken appropriate measures to cover 40%. The insurance program is, so the insurance program we place on the infrastructure is for that 40%.
For the 40%.
Yeah. However, for the Waikato councils, because you are relatively benign in the earthquake natural disaster exposure, we were able, as you can see, relatively low premiums, secure an insurance policy for the remaining 60% up to a maximum of $10 million in 100% terms. So that 10 million is actually 6 million. Now that came about because there had been some instances, I understand, past whereby not necessarily the funds have been recovered from back then. I think that what they do use or can use a different basis of establishing what damage is. And I think we've seen some stuff probably in the newspapers that they're going through this in the newspaper at the moment. Some of the costs aren't being included. So because you are a benign natural disaster area, we were able to get that signed up. We call it signed up covers. We've got 40% all the way up to 150 million on top of my head. And then we've got this bottom, which is provides you that 60% last.
Okay, so you're saying that we're capped at 150 million?
Yes, in 100% terms, but within that, Ōtorohanga will happen in a limit, and I can't remember that off the top of my head, but that was based on some model some 2 years ago.
I have to be pretty significant to exceed that. Okay, and the other one I had,
Just one councillor, maybe if I could just ask a couple of questions. For either Graham, Deanna or Nat, infrastructure insurance, the excess of 500,000. Is that there or thereabouts in terms of councils of similar size? Right, thank you. How are you going, Councillor Jeffries? Oh, good.
Can I just?
Of course, of course.
So how do you run debt excess of 500,000?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it would depend, where it was. I'm guessing we would have to, fund that up front, and then we would probably have to loan fund it. Something.
You can't insure it.
Great try.
Build the excess.
It just seems excessive now, because don't use it supposed to find this really don't do.
There's a trade-off against the cost. The lower the excess, the higher the price. Councillor Jeffries, I think we've done a great job at ad-libbing for you to get to your next point.
Already answering some of the questions, or has the strategic things. On page 58, just to do with the external health policy, which I totally support. I think that's a very good one. I just wanted to make it clear though that when I was working with Waitomo, if there was a residual balance left from the payout of insurers after election costs had been deducted or credit costs, that money went to the estate from the deceased person. Is that the same case here?
The deployment of those happens to lots of but the deployment of those monies is entirely down to you. That's the council. So, and that's kids and I have known each other for some time. So, that's actually a really good question. And I'll tell you which is the history behind those policies was to allow for a by-election. It's right costs for a by-election. That's why they were put in place. They do actually cover individuals. What I will say is they are very strictly a personal accident and sickness policy. It does not cover death with natural causes or death with wounds, unless they're a result of an accident. So, if you are looking at doing something which is more down that line, that is not the appropriate solution. That is just for the death by accident. Sure.
And what's the limit on that?
Top of my head, I think it's 100,000.
Yeah, so the point I'm making there is that if it costs 50,000 for a by-election and the policy paid out 100, I'd like to think that the council had the discretion, if you like, to say, well, that other 50 should go to the deceased.
You have complete discretion.
Okay, that's cool.
One final question. Inflationary pressures. Are you folks satisfied that that's an adequate sum?
It is one that we're going to be reviewing for this round. We're keeping in mind what the judgments are and what is coming out. So,
good. Okay, so timely question. All right. So, unless there are any other questions,
I was sorry, just going to say that Eddie and Dee don't get a copy of my report, so they've done an amazing job at guessing what's in it. So, thanks for that.
good. Okay, so the proposal, the recommendation is that the committee confirms the appropriateness of current policies, being the Aon broker insurance policies and the Marsh public liability policies. And I'll come back to that because we've got no information on that last bit. So I think that we should confirm the appropriateness of the Aon broker insurance policies. I've got a question about the others, we'll give you that later. So with that amendment, is everyone comfortable with that? So that will be moved by Councillor Jeffries, seconded by Councillor Excellent. Bethany, thank you so much for coming along. Getting ready to see both how the objective So, folks, I think what we might do now is should we take a 5-minute break to have some refreshing, and then let's get into surely the highlight of the day, bringing in sensitive expenditure policies. Thank you very much. Right. Thanks, Dave. Welcome back, everyone. We are turning now to the sensitive expenditure policies. Thanks for having this time. I just want to say I thought you've done a really good job on this. There are a couple of policies you want to think about again, is that right? So if you could just be clear with us about which ones you want us to consider.
Yes, so after the edit writing, thinking about it some more, there's two that we want to get out of one being the gifts and cohorts. So Cassidy is ready to work on next around cohort specifically, and so we want to do more work time. Policies, and then also around these so we did put a little bit of it but just expanding it as well. So the theory there is for today.
Thanks, Tim. If I just make the point that the only issue I had was with this policy, and the point I mentioned during the break was I had some confusion about when one was obliged to report it. There were a lot of numbers flying around. One of the smart things that you would start to do was do this in a way which was free. And I think in an inflationary environment, that's very smart. So we'll leave you bring those two policies back at the next time and ask colleagues whether they've got any questions about any of the remaining policies. Councillor Hughes.
Mr. Chairman. Page 22. Says no expenditure. Just a question is that the sole discretion of staff? And if so, does finance or further on this policy monitoring such expenditure? Do finance or every expenditure? So,
in terms of we don't review everything. This is the least set up, so we can't improve our own version and rate. So it has to be something else. So do rely on forcing that, or also checking contesting, say, like things like this, staff expense payment stuff, spotting on those, overall complying, but I guess we don't go through this being pretty much something else. Yep. Any issues today? Do the honest as well as certain invoices that come up with this question for people who go back and check those. So in the day-to-day interaction, finding
page 34, gifts received by the council.
That I think is, that's the policy that's being pulled, is that right?
Yeah, it's part of the gifts policy we are pulling, but I guess if you have a comment, I will take it. We find that way.
Sure.
Yeah, it was really just about if council does receive a gift over a certain amount.
Yep.
Do we have somewhere where those are stored or kept or displayed or they just put in the storeroom somewhere? I know I can use Waitomo again as an example. Yeah. With their sister city, they used to have a cabinet with all of the gifts from sister city, on display.
So we did obviously have a cabinet before the building. Yep. April. That I believe got rid of as part of the upgrade. I don't know. I think a lot of them are kind of stored in vault at the moment. I guess probably on an individual get-by-get basis, whether it should be displayed or not, but that's.
No, I guess where I'm coming from there is that if somebody, just say I gave council a good business for some reason, and I came in a year later, and I couldn't see it where I could possibly be offended by the fact that council wasn't displaying my gift. So, you see where I'm coming from?
Yes, no, I absolutely see where you're coming from. I guess I don't know who the best person to answer that question would be. Who that actually. We may have to do some work on that, do that policy practice, but it's not who's in charge of making the most display or store.
Thank you. Page 38, it's just in relation to, you've got the scope there, policy applies to employees of a council. Actually, what made me think about this was that was raised by Kev at a last council meeting about professional development, and I wondered about what about I've got here, what about elected members for related professional development expenses? Are they not covered for that sort of thing?
I guess this is the professional memberships policies. This is being a member of a certain entity. So, for example, Graham himself charge of business Australia, New Zealand. This is the policy around the council to pay for that, or we get paid for ourselves. I guess when we put this together, because this was just obviously a review of the one from a few years ago, we hadn't considered that it was councillors probably to pay for those memberships for councillors. If that was something that councillors believe they should, I guess that's a discussion to be had. That's probably that discussion was had.
Yeah, it was more in relation to professional memberships that are not necessarily a requirement of your job, but are an advantage to the employer for you to have those professional memberships. And that could be being a member of IPs or engineering, where it protects council as well. Yeah, and but it certainly wouldn't mean that we'd be paying for professional memberships for something that's totally not related to council business. Yeah. Councillor Prendergast, any other questions? Councillor Hughes?
Gee, I'll just a quick one. It's just a clarification thing about under the entertainment and hospitality policy, about the alcoholic drinks being provided to employees. Yes, it says here they must only consume a reasonable amount of alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, this is rather a subjective term, I would have thought, because reasonable to you and reasonable to me can be two different things. So is it more specific within the council's drug and alcohol policy, per se, as to what the expectations are around that?
From my memory, I must admit I looked at the drug and alcohol policy for a little while to put in. I'm pretty sure it's a bit more specific in terms of limits. Obviously, if you're driving a council vehicle, I'm pretty sure it's zero. You should ban the alcohol from council vehicles, for example. So I'm pretty sure it goes into detail, but I can't.
I mean, I see that, through a lot of these policies, reasonable is a word used quite a bit, which can, as I said, it can be a little subjective at times with anything, probably.
Yeah.
And especially amongst alcohol consumption.
Yes.
So, yes, I just wanted a bit of clarification as to whether that was actually more specific with the policy itself.
Yeah.
Moved by Good, thank you for your work, very much appreciated. Let's move now to, I think we're going to touch on it, we're almost ready. And if we could maybe move while we're waiting to Capital Works delivery. This paper is page 104. No, it's not. What page is it? Yeah, I think I found that the opening 10 pages were correct. Everything else was all over the place. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Jeffries. Okay, Mark, is there anything that you wanted to add to the paper before we get into questions?
Yes, and it's probably just a timing thing around when the report was written and what I've learned over the last week, and it's just under the Three Waters reform section. You'll see I detailed it there that it's about to go to its first reading, but it has had its first reading out on the 22nd of June and has gone out for submissions, which we have 9 days left to put a submission on that amendment, like 5th of July, should we wish to submit, or should council wish to submit. So that was just one part there. And I also just wanted to, I attended a local transition team meeting last week as part of the water reform, and there was discussion around the staggering or staging of the entities being stood up and what impact that may have on staff retention over the next couple of years. And just wanted to highlight that as a risk, because we know currently that entity A is unchanged and will be stood up by the 1st of July 2024, which may affect staff retention as those jobs become advertised, and then as the various other entities stand up on a staged approach over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see that sort of possibly strain on small councils such as us and that stuff. So, and there is, of course, some questions to what's next. The reason, for example, the Waikato district relies on Watercare for its water services. Yes.
And for it to be an NCTB is a bit of a problem.
Yes, interesting, situation. Yeah. So those were probably the only, just I suppose, additions to the timing between writing the report and what I learned last week. So other than that, nothing else to add.
Thanks, Mark. Questions from colleagues?
It's probably a question to you, through the chair. Question to you, Peter, in terms of the impact with Waikato. Sorry, no, question to you really, Peter, being the chair of COLAB, in terms of Waikato district using Watercare. What impact is that going to have? Because I mean, they're a significant council, there's no question in terms of that entity.
So it's less a collab issue than the fact that my understanding is that Waikato is asking to be included next again.
Wow. I don't really know what to say to that, because that's significant. Yeah.
But the reality is they've got no water services because they outsourced it to Watercare, to my understanding. Okay. Anyone got any questions? I've just got a couple. Mark, one of the things, and the point I made to Graham is I think what we're going to try and do with each of these reports is just slowly over time try and get them more focused and get them more focused on particularly risk. I didn't quite get a sense from this report as to the percentage of the CapEx budget that will have been delivered this year come the 30th of June. In approximate terms, what percentage of the CapEx next budget will review to look.
Trying to think about it in percentage terms, I think the community facilities is quite reasonable at 85%. I would, on the spot with a, it's going to be somewhere in between the 60, maybe 65%, without having that right in front of me, Peter, and that's probably a little bit of
The reason why I asked that question is less about getting specificity about the percentage, although at 65, my understanding is that would be about the national average. It's more about, so what are the risks associated with carrying over capital work? So, and I think this is the sort of thing that the committee will be more interested in, which is for a whole bunch of reasons you won't be able to complete the program. So what does that mean? Are there penalties? Are there contractual risks? Are there cash flow issues that Brent's got to manage? That's the thing I think that I'm most interested in. At the end of the day, you've got your projects, your job is to deliver them. From our perspective, it's called the Risk and Assurance Committee, and it's therefore about understanding what kind of risks do those timing issues create, not just for you, but for the wider organisation, particularly from a financial perspective. That's why I asked the question. So I guess I'm making the point that I don't necessarily need an answer now because it's a complex answer. But in terms of, from my perspective, unless my colleagues have a strongly different view, I'm really keen on understanding as we go through these meetings in the course of the year, how is the program tracking? What are the risks in terms of carryover, and what does that mean? And are there some things, Mark, that we should be doing now in order to make sure that those risks are managed as best as possible? Does everyone get that point?
I think it's a very good point you're making, Mr. Chairman, and it's one that I raised in a slightly different way to last council meeting. I was asking about what the effective carryouts was going to be when budgeted for next year, and I was sure that it wasn't going to affect anything. But I guess the question is that if you're carrying those works over, how does it affect the work that you had programmed for the following year anyway? Does that mean that
that's precisely the point? And in an inflationary environment, councillor, it seems to make it even Mark's job even more difficult. So if you're continuing to carry over, this is not a criticism, but if you're continuing to carry over and then you add your next year's CapEx program on top, aren't you compounding the problem? As an amateur, that would be my question. So again, not intended to be critical, but I think what I'd like for this committee to have an overview on is as risks are building up in terms of carry forwards, leaving aside the question is it might be part of a 3-year plan, making sure we understand what those risks are to the extent that we can replace some mitigations that help you, then this is a good time to raise it. Does that make sense, mate?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think this LTP in particular, we have taken on some quite considerable large projects, which in reality could never have been completed in 1 year anyway. So I suppose it's around how that program works over a 3-year cycle. Added to that was the additional capital works that had to be carried or completed stimulus funding at the beginning of the LTP at the end of 2020 to 2021. So, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I don't know whether it's, I suppose, a process around how that's financed over 3 years, rather than thinking of it being completed in each annual plan cycle. I'm not sure if that's, I'm looking at it from a build perspective. Sometimes it might take 12 months to get the project to a build phase. So you might hold that budget in year 1, but realistically, maybe the budget should sit in year 2 to avoid that.
It's precisely, it's a great point, mate, and it's precisely the point that others have cottoned on to, which is that you should start planning for next year's capital program, the previous year, so that recognising how hard it is to stand up these projects, Otherwise, effectively, your budget gets out of sync with your delivery.
Sure.
We've seen that with the wastewater upgrade project. It's taken us almost 2 years to get it awarded. So we've carried that budget for 2 years effectively, and carried it to the 3rd year now. We've actually only started the build in the 3rd year. So there was a lot of planning and design in those first 2 years. Yeah, and I think, as I've sort of outlined in my report, I think from a staffing point of view, we're probably one of the best positions now with some of the recruiting we've done to do that forward planning.
You've now got a project manager.
A manager of a projects team, which is his sole focus. It's not also running 3 other portfolios. Yeah, and that will evolve again. You know, it's not saying it's going to be perfect in day one, but as we move into year 2, that will get those systems in place and hopefully be in a better position going forward.
Because it does ultimately impact on the rate in terms of understanding when money is needed, just the right time in order to deliver projects. Okay. All right, I think I've made my point. And again, as I say, not to be critical, but I think that the sector, this is a sector-wide issue in terms of delivery of capital projects. And I think we need to be smarter in terms of doing more planning up front and then making sure budgets and plans and long-term plan reflect what it actually takes in order to stand these projects up. Okay.
Just one further question, Mr. Chair. Well, it's a point actually, Mark, page 64, when you talk about the risk of land transport activity, I guess it applies to other aspects as well. I would have thought that somewhere in there, unless I've missed it, the availability of contractors would be a real risk, because I guess every local authority is going to be wanting to have stuff done, particularly with all of the stuff that's been down there, flooding, things and bits and pieces. So I just wondered whether that needs to be flagged in some way.
Thanks, Councillor Jeffries. Just one other point. It's actually a question, Mark, on paragraph 4.12 of your report. You say changes in traffic management guidelines to a more risk-based model may start to influence the cost of delivery of temporary traffic management. Influence in a increased cost or lower cost?
Yes, it's hard to gauge at this stage, so I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Compton, the existing code of practice for traffic management.
Now, all I know is that New Zealand must have the highest incidence of traffic trips per capita.
So, I suppose what they're doing is, Compton is a very prescriptive, templated code where if you want to do a repairing road, you look at the map. So, for example, I'm pulling some numbers out of the sky here, map 4.1, that tells you where to put your road cone, where to put your sign, your measurements and things like that. The new New Zealand guidelines is moving away from that to more of a risk-based design where there'll be a set of templates that you can look at, but instead of having measurements, sort of prescriptive diagrams, it'll be a lot of prompts as to what you should consider in this zone, this area. So the way I understand it is it could be open to a lot more interpretation and a little very subjective as to what that person might put forward as what they see as addressing the risk as opposed to what someone assessing that might perceive the risk. So whereas before we used to run pretty prescriptive measurements, lines and template, that's sort of moving away. So it just seems to me on the face of it, and we haven't even tested it yet, that might come with an extra level of cost and compliance around how you, I suppose.
Isn't it as simple as hiring good people and asking them to exercise common sense like we did in the old days? Why would that cost more? And I'm not trying to be argumentative with you, but we seem to have outsourced common sense.
Yeah, and I think, I suppose the indication at the moment is it's probably going to cost more. I'd like to be proven wrong removes a lot of that, I suppose, prescriptive setouts, and that someone could actually put a risk-based sense check over the scene or the site. But I suppose evidence in the past has proven it won't go backwards, it'll go to more extreme before it goes less. So I think that there's a you know, a very risk-averse sort of culture around that sort of thing, health and safety and traffic management. So I can't see it coming.
Risk-averse culture in Wellington, I'm not sure we're at the base of the rest of the country. And I think that's part of the problem. I think that the conversation we have with the auditors indicates that we seem to be getting in our own way to get stuff done. So again, I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No, I appreciate the comments.
But I love the idea that we've moved to a risk-based model. If only we would properly embrace risk-based model, which is to exercise sound and reasonable judgment about what's appropriate in the circumstances, rather than having that dictated to us. Okay, all right. I don't think I can take that any much further. I suspect I'm preaching to the conversion.
Through the chair, can I take it a bit further?
Okay.
Just on that, Mark, I mean, like, the whole idea of the concept of the risk-based model is quite wonderful, but does that then get peer reviewed by Wellington in terms of when you do your risk analysis and you only just like you do 50 cones as opposed to 300? I mean, it'd be nice if we had it as simplistic as that. Ōtorohanga Council analysed the risk and said, hey, it's pretty small, let's do this, but there must be a peer review aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, thanks, but I think that, sorry, Your Worship, I suppose that's the point I was making. It becomes a bit subjective as to what I may think is risk, as what you might think risk. So we're coming down to who does the audits and reviews and on the ground. So, yeah.
Can I just ask a question?
Of course, Councillor.
Mark, did you get our last meeting to say that when this new standard comes up, that as a council, we have a choice to adopt that or stick with the other one? Or did I miss?
Yeah, I think that was Richard that was talking about, and I can't recall what he said, but I think my understanding is there's a 5-year period for this to become, I suppose, the new standard, and then competent or one. That's my understanding. Yeah, I think I do recall Richard saying it, so I'm not sure he might have a different understanding.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Jacques. Yeah, so basically, there's probably another element that comes in here with this sort of thing is this worksite at the end of the day where, you know, your subjective decision was to put 49 cones out instead of 50, but WorkSafe came along after an incident and said, oh, you should have had 50, and you're prosecuted for that. So that's probably another element within the risk, assessing the risk part of it as well, because they're always lingering in the background, basically, aren't they? And I think they can be not unreasonable, but they sort of follow the letter of the law, WorkSafe, especially. So opening yourselves up with something that, as you said, could be a little more subjective than probably might be an issue as well.
Yeah, I think that's an overarching act that we have to work under as the PCBU anyway. So, and that comes down to the level of risk you're willing to accept on the ground. Yeah, it's an interesting.
I think it's the level of risk that you're willing to accept, but whether that fits within their framework is another thing as well. This is where we run into problems. I'd say, you know, say the PCBU thing is a overarching thing, but it's sort of got to. It's a difficult thing because how do you know what is enough and what is not until you've actually prosecuted for failing to comply with what they view as a reasonable risk compared to yours. So that's just a comment.
Okay, so we'll, I think we probably signaled to you as a committee, Mark, that we're really interested in seeing how your thinking develops under this new risk-based model. And hopefully, it will allow you to do things in a more flexible, more common sense way at a lower cost of rate base. Okay, colleagues, I think we are at the point where we will simply receive Mark's report. That's moved by Councillor Prendergast and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Mark, thank you very much, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Let's move now to the health and safety paper. Tancha, welcome. Thank you for attending. Proposal is, the recommendation here is that we receive Tancha's paper. Thank you for talking to Lynn Shirley at Waikato District. She told me last week that she really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you and was very keen to maintain the communication and more than happy to act as a sounding. So thanks for taking the initiative of doing that.
Yes, no, it was very interesting. And one of the key points that I did get out of the meeting is that to ensure that we have good communications with our staff. And she's given me a couple of ideas as well too, which I'm looking to implement with our staff. So it's very, very informative. Yeah.
Well done. So please keep up that communication with Lynn. I know she's keen to.
She's a busy lady. I actually sent her an email last week. I haven't heard back from her, but that's okay. But I've also been in contact with Tracy Stevenson. She was an health and safety consultant that trained me when I first arrived, so I've been able to reconnect with her as well to seek further advice on other stuff as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues have any questions on the paper? Just while you're looking. Paragraph 4.4, Tancha, of your paper, you say recent upgrade to e-road capabilities. That's that paragraph?
Yes.
And it's splitting out information. Who's monitoring that information?
So I've actually got a meeting with some of the reports automatically come to me, for example, the overspeeds.
Yep.
And the alerts will come to me regarding registrations whilst servicing. And I'll also get an alert for the seatbelt as well, just in terms of probably the other information like the speed, harsh braking, fast acceleration. So I'm meeting with Claire Vincent at Waipa. She's Waipa Fleet and Travel Manager, and she'll interpret all of that information for me, as well as our asset manager as well too. So we're going to have a bit more data to report.
Just while we're waiting for colleagues to come up with some other questions. I thought this was I thought your report was good improvement on last time, Tancha. Thank you for your efforts. For next time, I'm also interested in getting an understanding as to where you see our greatest risks are in health and safety. And the reason for that is if we have a good understanding about where our greatest risks are, then that's the area where we should be paying most attention. So I'd love for your thoughts on that for next time, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tancha, with the e-road system, is it actually set up to measure any off-road usage by these vehicles? So that, I mean, I know that a number of trucking companies can, when they go off the road, it doesn't register kilometres on the.
No, it's satellite capability, so it'd be able to measure wherever the vehicle would go, and you can actually track where the vehicles are.
Yeah.
So you could be
Because, look at depending on, so what percentage of, there wouldn't be a great percentage of off-road work done by the council vehicles anyway, but most of the places that they could go to would be quite close to the main roads anyway.
They would be close to the main roads. The only ones that possibly would go off-road would be their waters team. They had to go into what farm area or something like that.
I was just saying, because could be significant savings of the road systems were set up so that they, through GPS, say we're off-road now, then you're not charged for those kilometres off-road.
Yeah.
And that's used with the trucking companies widely now, especially like spreading companies. So,
Right.
I mean, because you're basically paying a road user charge
Hmm.
while you're not on public road. So if you could,
Yeah, so through the road system, we can claim that back, and I have been, I actually did some last week.
okay, so it is excellent.
Yes, so basically, it generates a report of all off-road usage, and then we just have to go through and make sure it is actually off-road, because sometimes GPS is slightly out. And then we claim that back from NTA, and they pay us back and give us a breakdown of it and everything, so yeah, we are doing that.
It can be significant cost if you're doing a lot of off-road work.
Yeah.
You're paying road users for nothing. So,
The two I did last week were about $50 all up, across all their vehicles.
Very good point, very good response. Thank you. That's very sharp. Any other questions for Councillor? Councillor Duke.
Just a quick one on 4.6, which is on page 62. The pre-qualification for contractors, does that apply to every contractor that we take on board here in council? Does it? You mentioned that of the 40 contractors. What do you mean?
For the last 12 months. For the last 12 months.
For the last 12 months,
Yes.
so only 20% were pre-qualified.
Yes, for the group that I've checked already.
Right, so is it a prerequisite that they have to have that, that
Well-
qualification before they actually get the work?
Well, it's something that we're not really possibly enforcing at the moment, but I was following other councils that we probably should be looking at, make sure that they are pre-qual, to make sure that they actually do have a health and safety plan for them and their staff.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a risk that we're taking by employing contractors that may not have the health and safety plan in place.
Does it fall back on us if we employ them and something happens to any of
I
their
believe
staff?
so, it does, 'cause
Yeah, right, so
It's a great point, councillor, and I imagine it's on your work plan. One of the things which is one of the things I'm really keen to hear from Tanchi next time is where are our key risks as we build up our health and safety capability in the council. It may well be that that's not there, even though it'll be on the work plan, but the key risks will help us work out where to deploy our resources first. But your point's an excellent one. Okay, any other questions before we receive Tanchi's report? So we'll receive Tanchi's report moved by His Worship and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Tanchi, thank you very much for your efforts,
thank you.
and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Let's turn now to Brendan's paper on outstanding management letter reports from the last audit. Brendan, thanks for your report. This is a report for receipt. So there were 22 items in the previous audit. 12 have been addressed, 9 are in the process of being addressed, and 1's in the early stages of resolution. So I'll assume that everyone's happy with the green stuff. So then we'll move into the matters which are in progress. I've got a few questions. Maybe while colleagues are going through their questions, I'll ask mine. Brendan, forgive me, the agency payments reconciliation.
Yes.
I'd never foggy clue what that was. Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, sure. So that's to do with levies that we collect for MV and brands for building consents.
Right.
So historically, that hasn't been a huge balance in our balance sheet. It's about $10,000 a year for both of them, sort of thing. Because of the work done by Curia and the massive increase in building fees, there was obviously the MV and the brands levies associated with that. That caused it to get right out of sync because the timing of the consents versus timing they were paying was getting way out of whack. So that's why we did a bit of reconciliation on it. So we're still in the process of doing that. It's actually fortunate that as my career started to wind down, there's less coming in, so it's starting to get a bit easier to reconcile it. Yeah, so the problem you have is that some of the issue with it possibly goes back historically from before, when we had before the system was in properly, and that this old consents potentially we've kept money, we've taken the money and never paid it on, or vice versa, we've never put the money in and we've actually paid heavily for it. It's all a timing issue from when the invoice is raised versus when the consent is issued. And so at the time the consent is issued, that's when we owe the money to entities at the time we raise the invoice. So particularly where there's been a hold or a delay on consent because we require further information, for example, we get quite a bit of difference. So reconciling it's not as easy as some of the things normally are.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. Anyone got any other questions? I've got some. Councillor Jeffries.
Just one, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Brendan, I think from memory, we probably need to go back through previous minutes. I thought we, when we were looking at these management matters last year, that we had suggested, I think, that there was some sort of timetable that needed to be agreed upon and that they should be pinged off within a certain period of time so that we're not having to deal with the same sorts of issues in 12 months' time if they keep rolling over. Was that ever done? Was there ever I'm pretty sure that we did talk about a timetable.
So I guess the green, orange, red was a basic timetable, and the green we think we've addressed. So that's all sort of orange ones we think we will have addressed by the end of June, and the red ones are the ones we're probably going to follow over to the financial year. So I didn't go specifically into we will have this done by this date necessarily, unless it's a specific meeting, for example. The green item about statutory expenditure policies, I obviously thought it was going to come to the June meeting because I knew that was the date, but I had not put the specific dates against everything else. But if that is something we want to go forward, I'm happy to look at doing that.
I guess the point that Councillor's making quite right there, but I think you've addressed it. It's leaving aside my reservations about the scope of this year's audit. The last thing you ever want to do is compound your workload by going into a new year's audit, still not having fixed up last year's issues, which I think is at the heart of Councillor Jeffries' point, and absolutely right. And I think you've just answered the question, thank you for that, by saying that you expect that the orange issues will be dealt with by the end of this financial year, which is coming up, and that there may be one or two items to carry up, but that I think is what we normally expect. But I certainly think that it would be useful in future audit risk and assurance meetings that as these audit points, management points come up, that we've got them, that we capture them, and that we report on them at every meeting so that we feel comfortable that we make progress, and to the extent that we need assistance or deployment of resource, we can help if we need to help. Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions? Just a couple of questions, a couple of suggestions. You're having a look at issues around information regarding legislative matters and also legislative compliance. I think I mentioned last time that Waikato District users comply with. Have you looked at that at all, Brendan?
I've had a look at it. I've seen that you did forward on the contact there. I haven't had a chance to get in touch with the person at Waikato, but I have had a look at the website.
It may tick a couple of issues off, and it will lock in. It's a self, having had a presentation on it, it's a self-reporting mechanism, right? In relation to compliance, but nevertheless, it's a great, from your perspective, as the head of finance, there's a great deal of comfort to be taken by the fact that there is at least an overview in terms of legislative compliance. That's the first point. The second point is that the declaration of interest register, and I appreciate it's probably a wider conversation for the council, but there are a number of board paper delivery mechanisms out there these days, which make the compilation of agenda, the compilation and distribution of papers, the creation of minutes, and the automatic update of interest register easy peasy. Right. The one that I'm most familiar with is something called Board Pro. And I suggest you have a look at it. One of its benefits is that it's got a good deal of functionality, but it's not particularly expensive, as opposed to others like Diligent, for example, which I understand is expensive and often used by listed companies. But I'd certainly commend Board Pro for you to have a look at it. It makes life a lot easier. And in terms of the declaration of interest register, members of the committee are able to go in and alter the interest register themselves, so that it's always up to date. And it certainly, as I understand it, makes, as I say, compilation of agenda, compilation of papers, distribution of papers, and preparation of the minutes a lot easier. So that may be something that might have some enduring benefit, not just for this committee, but maybe because I know what a difficult job Kaya and others have to do in terms of secretarial stuff. I think you've now answered my questions. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll receive, Brendan, your report. Thank you. And that'll be moved by Councillor Prendergast and seconded by Councillor Jeffries. Let's turn now to the quarterly risk and legal update, which I think is great. Brian, is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of this? I know that we have got a workshop straight after this to consider strategic risks and risk appetite. Okay. And my understanding, Graham, is that the strategic risks have had the benefit of executive team input. Excellent.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I didn't have anything further to add. So we've discussed this as leadership team, so there were no significant changes in our existing risks or new emerging risks, and the same could be said for any legal risks or emerging legal risks. So pretty short and sweet.
Great, excellent, thank you. So we will move that what we received will be moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Jeffries. Now, Kaya has kindly reminded me, Councillor Jeffries, that we need to circle back and sign off on the minutes from the previous two meetings. So, Councillor, were there any things that you wanted to query or expand on in those minutes? No, it's okay.
Yeah, it was in relation to that last sentence on page 11 about the progress of actions arising from the council report. We had, I'm not aware whether we've had any presentation back to the council on that. Mind you, I didn't attend the last council meeting anyway, so I forgot us.
Tanya, if you're with us, is that something that you wanted to update us on? Maybe Ross?
Just trying to unmute myself.
That's
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks. Very clearly, Tanya. So the question, Tanya, was
Related to page 11.
Related
Yep.
to Council Mark, and
Yes.
when you expected to provide an update to the council on progress.
Okay. Is Ross McNeil in the room at the moment?
He is.
Oh, because he had a conversation with Council Mark with Local Government New Zealand last week. So he may be able to respond to that in terms of where they're at with preparing the next framework for Council Mark.
Thank you, because from memory, there was an issue about rescoring. They were changing the way they did the assessment.
Yes, they were.
Some difficulties. Is that correct?
They were splitting out a couple of categories, I think, to make to put more emphasis in some areas, like around iwi Māori relationships, etc. So yeah, Ross would be able to update you, hopefully.
Thank you. So I think we've ad-libbed long enough for us to be able to work out what it is you're going to say. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think there are two things in Councillor Jeffrey's question or comment. One is the existing improvement plan program. And so the thinking was alongside the update that I've now had from LGNZ around the direction that Council Mark is taking is to prepare a report covering both elements. Where have we got to with our original improvement plan, and what does the next or the Mark II version of Council Mark look like, and our interest or otherwise in progressing a reassessment. But our Chief Executive is quite right. The review that LGNZ have been undertaking is to change the focus more to be an improvement, a continuous improvement program rather than a point in time, here is your grade. So there's some additional information that I've just received. I haven't had a chance to look at that. Fair to say that that updated or review program is probably still several months away from being completed to the point where LGNZ will be in a position to be able to offer a new round of assessments.
Thanks, Ross. So leaving aside the question as to the future, where obviously you and others in the sector are thinking about the extent to which there's value there. Nevertheless, you had the benefit of a report which is, and as I understand it, you're leading the program in terms of responding to the existing report. I wonder whether it might be useful for maybe the next meeting if we could just get an update from you as to how things are going in terms of progress against the previous report. I mean, a verbal update would be fine on where things are landing in terms of the future of Council Mark. Is that okay with you? Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Councillor, for your question. Anything else, Councillor? Great. So I think we're at a point now where we can, in fact, confirm the minutes. So let's move by Councillor Prendergast and seconded by Councillor Jeffreys. Thanks, Colin. Let's turn now to, since we have him on his feet, the climate change risk consideration. Ross, welcome. Thank you. Can someone tell me where that page we're on now? 120. Thank you. Here it is. My sense, Ross, was this was a work in progress, and I'm interested in your thinking as to, while my colleagues are thinking about questions, of which I've got a few, I'm interested in your thinking as to how this would build out over time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I can start by just sharing, because it may not be as clear to members as it was to me in putting this, particularly the table together around use of words like direct and indirect focus, and the nature of how the actions have been considered and presented.
You've stolen my thunder, those were my questions.
But I'll preface that with, this is a work in progress, so this is a sort of first cut starting point. So perhaps I'll address, Mr. Chair, the risk focus column in the table, which is the direct indirect. So think of these risk areas and the nature of risk in the sense of what is council's ability to directly influence, control, manage, mitigate, respond to, and they are the direct, that's the group that have the direct risk focus. The ones that have indirect are things that involve other parties, whether they are other infrastructure or service providers, or indeed the owners of private property. So we don't have much, if any, control outside of a sort of regulatory framework or a civil defence emergency management response to direct what may happen on those properties or in regard to the services, the infrastructure that support services, those services. So think about our electricity supply entities, so Waipa Networks and the Lines Company, how they manage their infrastructure and the investment that they make or don't make may have a direct bearing on what we're able to do in terms of our service delivery, water, wastewater, and the like. So we can certainly engage with those, and we do engage with those companies in terms of what their development and investment plans and resilience plans might look like. But at the end of the day, that's a business decision that they will take. What we can do is, what is our ability, having regard to that reliance on, say, the Lines Company or Waipa Networks for power supply, what can we do to mitigate any issues they may have around electricity supply in terms of our critical services? So water supply, wastewater, good examples where, and indicated there, that we've got connectivity to plug in a generator if power goes out, and we can continue to provide a level of service. I guess the question for this committee and the consideration, I suppose, of the leadership team is having plug-in connectivity sufficient, or given the criticality of the service and perhaps the nature of the risk, is that an area of investment that we should be considering in terms of purchasing sufficient generators to be able to, I'll use the term plug and play, if that proved necessary. And it's, if I might add, that's an area where some councils are working with their electricity supply authorities to invest in that infrastructure, with the potential for that not only to be activated during a supply outage, which may not necessarily be a civil defence emergency, and at the same time be able to generate power and put it back through into the network. So there's those dimensions as well. So I'll move on then from the direct, indirect, and just look at the column relating to actions. Hopefully it's clear, but I'll elaborate just so it is clear. This is a collection of things that we have done, are currently doing, or propose to do, and the proposed are the ones that are highlighted. There's a couple of question marks in the column. They relate to exercising, for example, the emergency powers provisions of the RMA. And it's a question mark at this point because I do not know the answer, and wouldn't suggest that this is advice in that regard in any shape or form. So what's an example of that? If we're in an extended drought period, what is the ability in terms of operating our rural water supply schemes to exceed the limits of the resource consent conditions that are applied to those? Now, I know this is an area that's been part of discussions already, and no doubt that'll continue. But Mr. Chair, that was just a bit of a flavour or a snapshot of the thinking behind what's been presented for the committee's consideration, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ross. I think close observers would know that I favour brevity just about over everything else. I thought it was just a superb report, but it's sobering, extraordinarily sobering. Both in terms of raising questions as to whether the council is in fact prepared to accept high residual risk in post-mitigations, and what are the implications of that. And then having had a conversation with Mark about his delivery of capital plan, the extent to which the proposed actions have been slotted into that plan and budgeted. So can we deal with the more mundane, or possibly more important first, which is these proposed actions, which even then would result in some pretty high residual risk to council. Have these actions been proposed for the next LTP and proposed for future budget?
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. So the residual risk to council excludes the proposed actions.
Oh, it's pre-mitigation risk.
Yes, it is pre-mitigation. So what we've already done.
Residual risk, and okay.
Yeah, so my apologies. Maybe the table needs to be refocused.
I beg your pardon. So basically, when you talk about residual risk to council, you are talking about the unmitigated, pre-mitigated risk.
Yes.
Okay. And what you haven't got here, and maybe it's because the council hasn't yet decided what is the target risk appetite. It's not there at the moment. That's the bit that's missing.
Correct.
And it's the delta that has to be funded.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So the proposed actions, as I continue to ad lib in case any of my colleagues have any questions, the proposed actions are actions which are proposed, which you believe will reduce the risk to what you guess will be. But that's not a criticism. What you're guessing will be an appropriate appetite for risk in the council. Yes. Okay. And is it your intention that those actions would be included in the next long-term plan?
So some of these are already underway. So for example, the reassessment of the Ōtorohanga flood protection system is a project that's flagged within the Ōtorohanga town concept plan. Action program that's been prioritised, so that will happen. And I'd like to think if it isn't complete by the time we or council considers and adopts the next long-term plan, it will be substantially progressed. So that's happening in any event. The urban area modelling, that would be something in my view, having discussed it with the leadership team and Mark Lewis in particular, would be something that would need to be considered as part of the next long-term plan. Once we understand the scope and cost of that work.
Okay. So in terms of what you need for future guidance, it is confirmation from the council as to its expectations about its risk appetite with respect to each of these risks. That in turn has consequences from a planning and budgeting perspective. And the other point you're making, which is a really good one, is the interconnection between the council and substantially important players like the Lions Company in terms of maintaining essential services.
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that we've seen even as late as the weekend in relation to State Highway 25 was the risks of slips and the damage that does to access points for people if there are no alternatives. And we've also seen the dangers up north of losing one access point and then the secondary access point is not up to a standard which will be able to cater for supplies of essential goods like trucks. Where do those slips / access issues reside in your table?
So that is under extreme weather events. So it's on the second page. It's the top row. So identifying critical infrastructure susceptibility to inform council work programs and or engage agents and partners. So I guess the context for this is or was the recent impact on state highway connecting Kāwhia and a general conversation both within a staff and elected member level around what the potential mitigation measures might be for ensuring ongoing connectivity to Kāwhia. And so the risk in my mind is that if we're not careful, we focus on a one road solution. And depending on where the impact might be, we might be considering a three-road solution, Mutanui, Okapata, and the regular road, for example.
There are different implications depending on who's got control of the road, doesn't there? Because what they're going to take a control private road, but presumably the council may own some of the secondary roads. If there's a need to build in redundancy, then there's an additional cost to the council itself there, depending on which strategy the council decides to adopt.
Yes, potentially, I guess my thinking, Mr. Chair, is that we would be using that example to inform a discussion that we would have with Waka Kotahi in terms of being able to continue to assure connectivity to Kāwhia, which is the level of service responsibility of Waka Kotahi in terms of the state highway. So rather than council just assuming that all of the costs or any costs associated with that, ensuring that mitigation was in place and the redundancy associated with it was borne by our ratepayers, or indeed part of the normal roading program, which is co-funded with Waka Kotahi. So I think it would be premature to presume anything, but I think while we've been unfortunate as a country to experience these severe weather impacts, events and the impacts that they've had, this is, I think, an ideal or an opportune time to start thinking about the nature of this sort of work for our district.
Right. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you. Just sort of following on from what you said there. So part of this matrix here, the risk assessment matrix has been, if you looked into lessons learned from what's the flooding they've had over in the Hawke's Bay and that sort of thing, where they went right as far as, say, dealing with, as you said, electricity supply and access for remote roads and stuff like this. So was that looked into as well, or was it just a generic type sort of overview, focusing mainly on our area?
So I think, Councillor, that there has been some consideration probably within Mark's team. I guess what this highlights is, or puts in place as a framework where we can have a more sort of focused and directed consideration of those things. So if we were to identify critical infrastructure susceptibility, for example, we would have regard to things that had happened in other areas of the country and the West as well.
Great point, Councillor. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So Ross, with regard to exactly this, will we be given a workshop or about plan as to individual examples of, for example, being identified as critical infrastructure? Like, for example, on my right, there's one road that isn't down to Kāwhia. So that the
So we would, through Mr. Chair, I think we would need to come back to this committee with the work that was being done in each of these spaces, so that you had, as a committee, a sense of what the mitigation measures are, and the question around, I guess, the residual, what does that do in terms of the residual risk, having regard to the Chair's comments around Council's overall appetite for risk. Council, in my view, would be best guided by this committee's consideration of those things.
So, Ross, Yes, it's so much to unpack here because it's such a difficult issue, both for the council and for the community it serves. In terms of next steps, what would you suggest we do next, and how can we help?
LTP development process. So that, I think, is the first thing. The next, I think, is starting to think about what risk appetite, in a general sense, might mean for council, having regard to perhaps some of these climate change specific risks and issues, bearing in mind that this is only a snapshot of the overall risk consideration for council.
Okay, thanks, Ross. I wonder whether we just try and excel one line into it. Let's, as a group, just have a quick look at the risk areas, which is the far left column. Are we satisfied that Ross has pretty much covered, and I think he has, the key risk areas? Seems to be a good list to me. And then the description of the nature of the risk seems to be a pretty good description. In terms of the risk focus, and thanks, Ross, for making that distinction between areas where the council's got the ability to control or substantially influence the area, and where it doesn't. I was starting to freak out when I turned the page and saw even more high risk over setbacks. But I think the way you've done it is a lot clearer now, where there are a number of those areas on the second page where council does not either control or substantially influence those risks, because they're effectively issues that are controlled by others, or not the risks where the council, as you say, can control or substantially influence. Is everyone comfortable with that column? That seems to me to make sense.
There was one, sorry, Mr. Chairman, there was one there in that risk area that I wondered whether we could consider whether it was appropriate not mass communications, because one of the things that really impacted Carpia the last time we had it made that there was, when the power goes out, you've got no phones. So unless your mobile is working, and in fact, mobile towers out there too get affected by outages as well. So you're essentially isolated unless you've got a satellite phone or something. So I just wondered whether it was there. One of those could include perhaps tiles, or whether it should be a separate area. I don't know, but I just thought I'd raise that.
I think it's an incredibly good point. Even Cambridge in the cyclone had no power and no phones, which led me to ask myself hard questions about my state of mitigations, and I resolved those issues within 24 hours. But I did wonder whether the comms is important, but it's a mitigation, it seems to me, rather than something that we would stick into the risk category. But I certainly think comms is a really important issue. One thing that, of course.
In my mind, I have got comms into the business contributed tax. Is that appropriate cost or not?
Through Mr. Chair, I think comms is a part of the whole program. So, you know, whether it's a drought or a disease or pest or flooding or whatever, there's a comms response component to that. And I guess while we've got generic plans, the details of the communications will only become clear once we know what it is that we're dealing with. But in terms of the communications infrastructure, that's under the Lifelines infrastructure service disruption
Thank you for making that, sorry, through the chair, making the clarification, Ross, because it's probably not comms, connectivity is the big issue. And that is certainly identified in time after the first event that I say the communities had no contact or any idea what was going on through that connectivity.
We had a good presentation from Billy, I think, at the last meeting, where he certainly alive to that issue in terms of making sure that there is the ability for the council to maintain its operations and maintain communication links. Okay, so I'm not sure that the committee can do much in terms of providing its own view on the risk profile. I think in some respects we've got to rely on judgments that are being made. Is it the intention that, because I'm not sure we've got the time to do this, Graham, when would you want to have a conversation about risk appetite in relation to these particular risks?
You know, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd envisage that we would treat these similar to our top 10 risks. We would do effectively a deep dive into some of these risks, and it would be probably good to get some indication now from which of these Ōtorohanga climate change risks that the committee would like us to bring back. So I think we would do a deep dive on those and then bring back some further information. So on some of these things, we've done a considerable amount of work already, particularly around flood risk, etc. So yeah, we do have sort of that information.
It would seem from your paper, Ross, that the areas of flooding, inundation of seawall, damage to council property, and inability to draw or treat potable water would probably be the priority areas, because they are the areas which have the greatest, highest pre-mitigation risk, and they are areas that you note as being ones under which the council has either the ability to control substantially influence. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd just add that it might be useful for the committee if we considered what the residual risk might be having regard to those proposed actions, because that's my next question here. That would give the committee a sense of comfort or not that the residual risk as it may have been assessed is still too high.
I think that is the next step, because fundamentally strategies, the reason one has a strategy is that one has limited resources. And so this council has limited resources, and so elected representatives have the unenviable task of deciding what to do first with the limited resources you have. And it makes sense to prioritise those things that have the highest risk post mitigations. So I think maybe the next step is exactly as Ross says, for some work to be done to bring back to the committee on what the post mitigated risk might look like. That I think would then give the committee confidence to say, in terms of the actions, we should proceed to start to allocate resource and prioritise those actions which are going to bring down the highest risks as fast as possible. Comfortable with that?
Yes, and I'll add that the timing of that would probably be ideal for feeding into the development of the next long-term plan.
And what is the timing for that, Ross?
So the plan itself needs to be in its, I guess, final sort of draft form ahead of consultation and engagement with the community, probably in about March, April say April of next year. So this calendar year certainly, and the sooner the better, particularly if some of the further actions that may be required to lower the risk have a substantial resource or financial component.
Exactly. And I think that's where elected representatives have got the biggest burden, which is trying to decide what to do when. So I wondered, Ross, if we could get you to come back in September to give us an update just in terms of that post-mitigation risk analysis, because that I think will, from that, we should as a group be able to work out what are the actions that should be prioritised into the LTP, certainly the cycle of the LTP, and that can then help in terms of both the budgeting and the project planning. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want from us at this stage?
No, thank you.
Great. So I think what we've done is, and thanks again, Ross, for this. I think we've got comfortable with the risk areas. We've got comfortable with the nature of the risk. We've got comfortable with the difference between directed and indirect. We've asked Ross to come back and have a look at what the position might be post mitigations to see what the residual risk to council will be. And that in turn will help us decide which of the proposed actions we should prioritise, because with prioritisation comes. Okay, good, excellent. That's been really helpful, Ross, much appreciated. We'll receive this report. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Jeffries. Okay, I